Well, welcome back to another great edition of Surviving and Thriving in a Pandemic. I am your host, Pastor Sharice Cross, and I'm excited for our conversation today. Today, we're talking about caregiving and self-care. I have a phenomenal guest today, and I want to let you know just a little bit about who she is. Dr. Lori James has become a much sought after voice of advocacy for caregivers of persons living with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia, persons living with this disease, and children's educational rights. In 2008, Dr. James established the James M. Dixon Foundation for Alzheimer's and Dementia Research and Support. The foundation was established in honor of Dr. James's father, who died in 2018 from Alzheimer's disease. As a nonprofit 501c3 organization that provides funding for many areas of Alzheimer's and dementia related illnesses and research, as well as support of caregivers through the arm of the foundation called Mindful Caring. The foundation is a grant giving organization that provides support to the ADRC and is establishing scholarships at the Morehouse School of Medicine. She is also president of Focused Passenger Services, which focuses on providing safe travels for traveling for people experiencing and passengers experiencing Alzheimer's and dementia related illnesses, as well as passengers with disabilities and children. Focused Passenger Services also assists airports in becoming more dementia and disability friendly and transports all passengers to their destination. Dr. James is on the faculty of Southern New Hampshire University, instructing graduate level students. She is also a subject matter expert in education for Southern New Hampshire University. Dr. James has also been on the faculty of Indiana Wesleyan University. Dr. James was born in Chicago, Illinois. Come on, Chi-Town. She attended the Academy of Our Lady High School. For undergraduate school, she attended the University of Texas, Knoxville, majoring in interrelated special education. Dr. James received the Master of Education degree from Georgia State University in the area specific to learning disabilities. She began coursework to obtain a PhD in educational leadership from Georgia State University. However, after seeking a program focusing on action research, writing, and ground theory, she completed a degree of Fielding University in Santa Barbara, California in 2003 with a focus on neuropsychology. Dr. James is an author. She wrote her first manual on the inclusion movement in 1991, titled Inclusion, Metamorphosis, or Masquerade, and completed a journal for teachers titled Teachers Tracks. She is completing a book that is a compilation of radio spots from Focus on Education. In 2017, she debuted two books, Letters to My Daughter and My Father Has Dementia, My Mother Has Denial. In January of 2021, Dr. James released her newest book, I Got My Mind Back. Can I Go Home Now? Dr. James has also provided leadership and authorship to textbooks written by Georgia State faculty members, as well as grant writing and proposal development. Listen, I've said a whole lot. I am so excited about Dr. James being on the show today. Welcome, Dr. James, to Surviving and Thriving in a Pandemic on Hope TV. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Well, thank you. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you, Pastor Cross, for asking me to participate. This is such surviving and thriving in a pandemic in a lot of different areas is such a needed topic that a lot of people aren't discussing, especially in the Black and Brown communities. And so I appreciate you hosting this show and getting the information out there that covers so many different areas. So thank you.
Thank you again. Thank you. Oh my goodness. I'm excited that you're here today. Listen, you guys just heard that extended bio. There's so much information that Dr. James is going to provide for us. We can't even do this in one talk. We can't even do it in one talk, you guys. So what I want to do today, we're going to just talk about surviving and what it looks like to survive as a caregiver, and we're going to talk about your journey of how you even got to the James Dixon Foundation. So first, we just want to talk about that. Like, how? Let's start with your journey, and let's start with where you are now. But let's start. Let's go back. Let's go back to even prior to 2018, prior to your father passing. But let's go back to just your journey and where you started.
That's a whole mouthful. My journey and how I got started in this area,
Yes.
and I guess the the, the journey actually started before my father was diagnosed because that took a while. However,
Mm-hmm.
the foundation was the journey to create the foundation was not even a thought before my
Mm-hmm.
father died in 2018. And the only thing that I knew was that I wanted to provide the best care for him. And even though I had cared for my grandmother and my grandfather and others, caring for my father was a little bit different. And so I knew I had to take my caregiving to another level. And I had to become what I have coined as an intentional caregiver. However, after daddy died, that's when the real work, so to speak, started. And the foundation was actually created out of grief, anger, and sadness. And although daddy was in his late stages of Alzheimer's, his death was exasperated by an incident that happened at the assisted living residence where he was living. And although we were paying an abundant amount of money each month, he suffered frontal head trauma. And almost 4 years later, I still don't know what happened. I do
Oh
know
Lord.
that he was in the care of a care provider.
Mm-hmm.
And this story is actually, this is a whole nother story in and of itself. And but
Mm-hmm.
nevertheless, a friend told me that God was going to show me how to use my anger and grief to help others. At the time, I didn't know what she was talking about. And so she suggested that I go have a little talk with God and find out. And a few months later, the James M. Dixon Foundation for Alzheimer's Research and Support was founded. And the original idea for the foundation was to support caregivers and provide and care providers who are drastically undersupported and underpaid. And there are
Mm-hmm.
more than 11 million caregivers in the United States, and most of them are non-paid.
Yes. Oh my goodness. That is so so much to that. First, the first thing you said that struck me was caregiving was different for my father. It's different.
Yes.
Caregiving all together is different. But what does caregiving look like for your father?
It was when I was 2, my mother died.
Mm-hmm.
And so I tell people that my caregiving journey actually started when I was around 4 or 5. And that journey was, trying to make sure daddy ate his Wheaties and drank a
Mm-hmm.
little bit more water and got some sleep. And because, taking care of a couple of toddlers was not an easy task either. And so
Mm-hmm.
that was the beginning, I think, of my caregiving journey, which helped me continue to care for daddy when he developed Alzheimer's disease. And so because it was my father, although with my grandmother and my grandfather, of course I wanted them to have the best care available. There was just something a little bit different because my father was my best friend and he was my confidant and
Mm-hmm.
he was fun and all kinds of other things, and I can talk about him forever. So I knew
Yes.
that for him, it needed to be at a different level, and that's what that's what I tried to do for him.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things God told me was, and to answer your question about what makes me different, he said, you're going to be authentic. Yes, other coaches will be able to help people, but you're going to be able to do that because of your authenticity of how you went through. And then secondly, what makes me different is I am a prayer warrior. I war for my
Hallelujah.
clients. I
Yes.
intercede for my clients. I
Yes.
pray for my clients.
You've just answered the 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of our questions right there.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move, so I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
You know, I was one of those Baptist babies born on the pew who remember songs like "So Forget About Yourself, Concentrate on Him, and Worship Him." It's hard to give the best if you physically are falling apart. So as a pastor, how do you reconcile that kind of theology with a theology of self-care?
The best gift that I can be to my congregation is to model it. God is concerned about every aspect of who we are. God created our mind. God created our bodies. Why would God create a mind, a body, a spirit, a soul, and tell us not to take care of it?
You mentioned that caregivers, they're not paid or trained. Yeah, what does that look like for you? You start to realize that your father is developing these signs. You're not trained necessarily in that area, but you are trained in a lot of areas. What did that look like?
Well, and a lot of caregivers, some caregivers are paid and they are trained, especially CNAs. In order to work in assisted living facilities and the like, you have to be trained. But
Mhm.
they're trained in what I call utilitarian care,
Mm.
doing washing, brushing teeth, pushing a wheelchair. But intentional caregiving takes that care to a totally different level. And again, that's a whole nother subject. And when you're intentional about something, you put your all into it, which when you're underpaid and overworked, that's difficult to do. And unless you decide to become a caregiver or a care provider as a career, you're correct. Most caregivers are not trained or prepared. And
Yes.
it's on the job training. And so for me, I read everything I could find. I talked to people. That's when I became involved with Emory's Alzheimer's, Guazetta Alzheimer's Research Center. And that's when I
Mhm.
met people who had been through the journey and they helped guide me through the journey. One person I call my angel, and because she had gone through it with her mom, and she helped me, my father, because we had put together a plan, but the plan wasn't working. And she helped me to rewrite that plan. And unfortunately, which is another reason that my heart goes out to caregivers, when she was caregiving for her mom, she didn't take care of herself.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
unfortunately, a year after I met her, she died because she
Mm.
didn't have the same type of care that she provided her mom and that she showed me how to provide to my father. And so, as a caregiver, you have to take care of yourself. You know, I heard someone say that caring for someone who once cared for you is one of the highest honors you can give.
Yes.
And that's how
Yes.
I approached caring for my father. And that's how I help to show others how to approach caring for their loved one.
Wow, so that's beautiful. I love that. I think about my parents and they raised me like you said, and now we help them. We honor them by serving them as they live out their last days. But that I also hear that we can take that to a place where we're not honoring ourselves and taking care of ourselves. That is, I've heard this story time and time again where the caregiver dies shortly after taking care of someone who was dealing with a long term illness. And so, when did you notice, okay, I need to reach out? I need to reach out and get some information. And like you said, you have a background in healthcare, but when did you notice, like, you know what, I need a little bit more? Yeah. What were the signs, I guess, that you noticed?
Well, before Daddy was diagnosed, because unfortunately in our community,
Yes.
we are not readily diagnosed. And even though I saw signs and asked the doctor to do certain things and perform certain tests, and even though my father was ex-military and so he had the insurance and the ability to pay for whatever was necessary, the doctor refused. And
Mm,
I chalked that up to my parents were in Sun City Center, Florida. And
mm,
believe it or not, in 1991, Daddy integrated Sun City Center, Florida. So that gives you an idea of the population of that city.
yes.
And so I don't think they took him seriously and they didn't take me seriously. But I noticed that something was going on. One day we were in Florida. We used to go to Florida for Thanksgiving every year.
Okay.
And when we would go to dinner on Thanksgiving, and when we were coming back to the condo from dinner, I said to we were in Orlando. I said to my father, I said they have an Uno's over there, which is a big pizza place in
Yeah.
Chicago. And I
Yes.
said we're going to go there for dinner tomorrow. Daddy
Hmm.
said okay. So the next evening we're getting ready to go to dinner, and Daddy said, "Baby, where'd you say we're going to dinner?" And I said, "I'm not going to tell you. I want you to think about it." He sat
Hmm.
there for a minute. And he thought, and then he said, Uno's. I said, absolutely. We're going to Uno's. He said, let me go get my shoes. He went in the bedroom, got his shoes, came back out, and he said, baby, where'd you say we're going to dinner? And
Mm,
I said, okay, this is, even though Daddy was in his 80s, I knew that was
mm,
not normal aging. And so
mhm,
that's when I began to start preparing myself mentally for the fact that
mm,
my father may have some form of dementia. And
mhm,
so I decided at that point, even though the doctors were not helping, that I needed to learn as much as I could do so I could take better care of him. Because I knew that if that's where the road was going, the journey was not going to be easy.
mm. My goodness, my goodness. And I'm glad that you were able to see that and focus, like you said, you had to reconcile within yourself, okay, there's something happening here. And so the denial wasn't there. It was that, no, I need to make a decision on how I'm going to best care for my father, even when the health system failed, even when the health system failed, and it's failing a lot of people, right? Even now.
Yes,
So,
yes.
yeah. So, um, for the resources that you have received and started to receive, you mentioned Emory, and of course, we love Emory. They have given us so many resources here, and I'm so grateful that they have partnered with us here at the House of Hope of Atlanta. They do have an extensive Alzheimer's program, but how did those resources help you, and how did those resources help you?
Well, initially, the resources that I received were more information, and you should do this, you should do that. For example, one of the things that a lot of caregivers refuse to do, and initially it's often because of denial.
Mm,
And so they don't want to do certain things because then it becomes real. And so one of the things that I had to make sure of was that Daddy's paperwork was in order. And one of the hardest things, Daddy was a computer whiz. One of the
mm,
hardest things to do was to get his passwords because Daddy stopped forgetting, he started forgetting how to pay bills. So he was not paying bills on time. So I had to take that over, but everything was computerized. And he
mhm.
didn't want to give up the passwords. So
I
that was
bet.
difficult. So so trying to figure out how to take care of those types of things, getting his paperwork in order, making sure he had a will, making sure there was a power of attorney in place, making sure that all of those things, which we should all, when we become adults, should have. My daughter is
Yes.
21 and she has a power of attorney because she's an adult now and she needs someone who can make decisions for her. But oftentimes we wait until it's too late and we don't
Yes,
have
indeed.
those things in place. So caring for a loved one becomes more difficult
Mhm.
because then we have to they can't make a decision anymore. They can't sign documents anymore. And so it becomes difficult. So resources on, finding the right attorney, making sure he was on the right medications and not too many medications. Daddy was taking 13 pills every day.
Mm.
And of course, some of that medication was not necessary. So knowing who to talk to see what's going on with all of this medication. Does he really need it? And trying to find the people to ask the right questions. All of those were things that you have to navigate through. And if you start early or find someone who can help you navigate through, then that makes it a little easier.
Yeah. That is so needed. It sounds like it's impossible to go in this journey without any resources. And I'm just thinking about the person who doesn't know or have access to their parents' information like you did, and like you said, it was all digital. And that's a blessing. That's a blessing because some of our parents hide their paperwork, and we have to go find it. And so, how do we even? Yeah, how would we even broach that conversation? How did you broach that conversation? And then talk about how caregivers can broach that conversation.
When you have, when you're caring for someone, especially a parent and an
Yeah.
older parent,
Mm-hmm.
approaching a lot of subjects are approaching those subjects difficult, taking the keys away.
Yeah.
No, you can't go out. A lot of topics are, you have to do it very delicately, and it's easier to start before it's necessary. So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, when I saw Daddy, I was following Daddy one day. He was driving. My stepmother was in the car. We were on an 8-lane, wasn't a highway, but an 8-lane road. So there were 4 lanes on my side. Daddy was
Mm-hmm.
in front of me. Daddy realized we were in the left lane. Daddy
Mm-hmm.
realized he needed to turn right at the
Mm-hmm.
next light, which was just a few yards ahead. Daddy went across all 4 lanes and turned right.
Oh,
No blinker,
oh,
nothing. Scared me half to death. So, didn't take the keys away then, but I started talking about it. Daddy, you
mm,
just went across 4 lanes and you didn't put on a blinker or anything. That could have been a disaster. So we started talking about that. We started talking about what are you going, if, although they didn't follow this plan, when you get if to the point that you can't take care of yourself or you all can't be here by yourselves, you need to move to Atlanta. They agreed,
yes.
but they didn't do it. So preparing ahead of time, talking to
Mm-hmm.
different organizations, the Alzheimer's Association, the Alzheimer's Foundation, HFC. They're different organizations. Of course, the foundation provides information and resources as well to people.
Mm-hmm.
So just finding out what it is that you need to do. And if you don't know, ask somebody. And
Yes.
we're just a phone call away. So you just have to ask.
What type of encouragement or something you would tell single people dating? Because dating
Social
is
media is not permanent. Social media is artificial. Learn how to be yourself with a person. Be honest.
And know your worth. And I will say this: quit valuing yourself like a Rolls Royce, but you showing hoopty mentality. You parading around like a hoopty. Because real men, somebody worth something, we not looking to take a hoopty home.
Severe weather can strike anytime, anywhere, but there's a simple way to stay safe. Hey, Jim Cantore here. I stay safe in dangerous weather by planning ahead. You can stay safe too with a few easy steps. Build an inexpensive kit with supplies for your family's needs. Write down important information like phone numbers and medications. Always talk with your family and remember any pets in your planning. Be ready, be safe. Start your plan today at ready.gov/plan.
We grew up with those kind of thoughts and sayings like, "Oh Lord, I don't want to take all of God's glory." Honey, who do you think you are? You can take God's glory. You haven't done anything. When was the last time you made a sun rise or a tide go in or out, or you set the stars in this place? So we can't take God's glory.
I was concerned you was gonna preach us tonight. You preaching us. You preaching us.
We're going to get to all the wonderful resources that you have and the help, because it's hard. Like our parents have been caring for us all of our lives, and we're used to that role, that parent role, and we're not being their parent, but we are being their caregiver. And I think that's even a difference, right?
Yes, absolutely. There is it's hard. It's hard. And that's why I started the Caregivers Forum that's going to begin broadcasting next week, where I'm going to show caregivers different tools and things to use and things that you don't think about. For example, it occurred to me, what would I do if I have to bathe my father?
Yes,
Something
yes.
that, of course, I didn't want to think about.
Right.
But that's something that you have to do. So how do you do that? So you as the
Yes.
caregiver feel comfortable doing it, and you and the person feels comfortable allowing you to do it. So there's certain tools you can use to make that a little smoother and a little less embarrassing for both of you. And so we're going to show different products and tools and suggestions and things that caregivers can use in order to help make their load just a little bit easier.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I think about those kind of questions, and I know our viewers probably ask or think about the same thing. How am I going to take care of my, say it's a son, and he's the only son and he has a mother. What does that look
Right.
like? How do they navigate that? So good that we need those tools. Such good information that's coming regarding this. So I am so grateful for this part of this journey that you have been on. We're talking about caring for caregivers and also self-care as caregivers right now with Dr. James Laurie. And if you can, you guys, please share this, make sure you share it, like it, and let us know your comments if you have any feedback for what and how you have been experiencing your loved ones. And even as a caregiver, let us know how that's impacted you, your journey. How have you been surviving? And I want to leave this last question, and then we're going to shift over to thriving. We're going to come back for another episode on thriving. But I want to talk about this real quick, Dr. James. Uh, we're in a pandemic. How
Yes.
has this pandemic, how has this been an impact? How has this impacted you? How has it impacted caregivers all over? So we're already, as caregivers, it's not an easy task, but we're learning and we're getting resources. But now we have this pandemic, and people have been isolated and in their homes and restricted. And then we have this virus that we're trying to make sure we keep our loved ones safe. How has that impacted caregivers right now?
Well, it's impacted them in a lot of different ways. For example, you're inside. That in and of itself, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, you were inside 24/7. And except for maybe a walk around the block, that was all that you had. Everything was shut down. And so that became frustrating, and you had to be involved not only as a caregiver, you're involved 24/7, but then you're right there. Oftentimes, when we're caring for a child or caring for a parent, and we're working or they're going to
Mhm.
school, we have a little bit of a reprieve. But with
Yes.
pandemic, there's no reprieve. You're in it knee deep 24/7. And so emotionally, that becomes more draining, more
Mm.
frustrating. And then to see the decline 24/7, that's a little more difficult. And so that
Yes.
does something to us, not only physically, but emotionally.
Mhm.
And physically, you're continuously working, especially if you don't have any support. And even if you did have support, when the pandemic hit, in most cases, if it was home support, home care support, that support was no longer available. And so then you had to rely on family and friends who often don't understand anyway. But in a pandemic, they don't want to come out and help either. And so trying to be a caregiver during things like pandemics, it's exponentially more difficult. And then trying to obtain resources when grocery stores were running out of toilet paper and paper towels and Depends and Lysol and cleaning supplies. And those are all things that you need 24 hours a day as a caregiver, and you can't find them. And I know one of the things that we did, we stocked up on those supplies. We stocked up on sanitizer and we gave it out to different assisted living facilities. And I would carry face masks when you couldn't find face masks. I carried them in my purse. So I would venture out to the grocery store. One time I saw an older woman, didn't know her, but she looked like she may have been in her 80s or so, but she had a dish towel wrapped around her face. And I asked her, because I wanted to approach her gently. And I said, would you mind if I give you something? And I had some face masks in a baggie, and I gave them to her. And she was so excited to have them, which said she didn't have any, especially since she was out with a dish rag wrapped around her face. And so those types of things, you can't plan for it. You can't plan for it, but trying to find the support that you need, you just have to keep looking and keep reaching out.
Thank you. Oh my goodness, that is beautiful. It just brings chills to me that she was out with a dish rag and you were able though to be right there at that opportune time though to give her some masks. And that's a beautiful thing. We take masks for granted. I see them thrown on the floor everywhere, but that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So listen, this has been so rich, so rich. We're talking about surviving and thriving in a pandemic, caregivers and offering self-care and providing and offering self-care. We are really going to talk about thriving in this next segment. Dr. James has already provided us with a lot of information, but we have a lot more to go. So we want you guys to come back next week and join us for this conversation. We're going to be talking about thriving as caregivers, many, many resources that can change your life or someone you know. So make sure you tune in and share this. And we thank you again for tuning in today. And we will see you again next week. Have a great day.
One of the things God told me was, and to answer your question about what makes me different, he said, you are going to be authentic. Yes, other coaches will be able to help people, but you're going to be able to do that because of your authenticity of how you went through. And then secondly, what makes me different is I am a prayer warrior. I war for my clients. I intercede for my clients. I pray for my clients.
You've just answered the 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of our questions right there.